माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी जय गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram. Jaya Radha Shyama Sundar, Radha Shyama Sundar Radhe. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Jayam Vishnupad Paramhansa Parivrajaka Ashtotar Sat. His Divine Grace Abhay Charana-ravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Krishna Balaram Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Shyama Sundar Lalita Vishakha Ki Jai. Shri Shri Gaurnitai Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashta Prayashvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 44, Killing of Kaṁsa. Text 31 through 37. only 37 has a purport. So what I will do is I will recite the verses and the translation by myself, and then we will recite together the 37th verse. Hateshu mallavaryeshu vidruteshu cha bhojarat Nyavarayat svaturyani vakyam chedam uvachaha. The Bhoja king said, the Bhoja king, seeing that his best wrestlers had all been killed or had fled, stopped the musical performance, originally meant for his pleasure, and spoke the following words. Nisarayata durvrittau Vasudevatmajau purat Dhanam harata gopanam Nandam badhnita durmatim. Kaṁsa said, drive the two wicked sons of Vasudeva out of the city, confiscate the cowherd's property, and arrest that fool Nanda. Vasudevastu durmedha hanyatam āśrayaḥ ugrasenah pita chape sanugah parapakṣagah. Kill that most evil fool Vasudeva, and also kill my father Ugrasen along with his followers, who have all sided with our enemies. Evam vikathamane vai Kaṁse prakupito vyayah Laghimnotpatya tarasa mancham uttungam aruhat. As Kaṁsa thus raved so audaciously, the infallible Lord Krishna, intensely angry, quickly and easily jumped up onto the high royal dais. Tam avishantam alokya mrityum atmana asanat manasvi sahasothaya jagrihe sochi charmani. Seeing Lord Krishna approaching like death personified, the quick-witted Kaṁsa immediately rose from his seat and took up his sword and shield. Tam khadgapanim vicharantamashu shenam yatha dakshina savyamambare samagrahi durvishaho grateja yathoragam tarksha sutah prasahya. Sword in hand, Kaṁsa moved quickly from side to side like a hawk in the sky. But Lord Krishna, whose fearsome strength is irresistible, powerfully seized the demon, just as the son of Tarksha might capture a snake. Text 37. Pragṛhya keśeṣu calat-kirītaṁ nipātya raṅga-upari tuṅga-mañcāt tasya upariṣṭāt svayam abja-nābhaḥ papāta viśva āśrayaḥ ātma-tantraḥ pragṛhya keśeṣu calat-kirītaṁ nipātya raṅgopari tuṅga-mañcāt tasyopariṣṭāt svayam abja-nābhaḥ papāta viśvāśraya ātma-tantraḥ pragṛhya keśeṣu calat-kirītaṁ nipātya raṅgopari tuṅga-mañcāt tasyopariṣṭāt svayam abja-nābhaḥ papāta viśvāśraya ātma-tantraḥ. Please chant. pragṛhya keśeṣu calat-kirītaṁ nipātya raṅgopari tuṅga-mañcāt upariṣṭāt svayam abja-nābhaḥ pragṛhya keśeṣu calat-kirītaṁ raṅgopari tuṅga-mañcāt upariṣṭāt svayam abja-nābhaḥ papāta viśvāśraya ātma-tantraḥ pragṛhya keśeṣu kirīṭam raṅgopari tuṅga-mañcāt upariṣṭāt svayam abja-nābhaḥ viśvāśraya ātma-tantraḥ. Matajis. keśeṣu calat-kirītaṁ nipātya raṅgopari tuṅga-mañcāt tasyopariṣṭāt svayam abja-nābhaḥ papāta viśvāśraya ātma-tantraḥ. Pragṛhya, grabbing, keśeṣu, by the hair, calat, knocking off, kirīṭam, whose crown, nipātya, throwing down, raṅga-upari, onto the surface of the wrestling ring, tuṅga, high, mañcāt, from the platform, tasya, of him, upariṣṭāt, on top, svayam, himself, abja-nābhaḥ, the lotus-naveled Supreme Lord, papāta, through, viśva, of the entire universe, āśrayaḥ, the support, ātma-tantraḥ, independent. Translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Grabbing Kaṁsa by the hair and knocking off his crown, the lotus-naveled Lord threw him off the elevated dais onto the wrestling mat. Then the independent Lord, the support of the entire universe, threw himself upon the king. Purport. In Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada describes the death of Kaṁsa as follows. Krishna at once straddled his chest and began to strike him over and over again. Simply from the strokes of his fist, Kaṁsa lost his vital force. Om ajnanatimiraṅdhasya jnanāñjana-śalakaya chakṣurunmīlitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Shri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhobhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvishe Namaha Pancha Tattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Svarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakhyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Aradhyo Bhagavan Vrajesha Tanayas Tadhama Vrindavanam Ramya Kachidupasana Vrajavadho Vargenaya Kalpita Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanamamalam Prema Pumartho Mahan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhor Matamidam Tatradara Naparaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to be back in Sri Vrindavan Dham, in Sri Krishna Balaram Mandir, and in the Srimad Bhagavatam class. Somehow Srimati Radharani has kept me away for 5 years, so I'm feeling very blessed to be back amongst all of you here today in this holy Purushottam month. Kaṁsa has just got killed, so we are celebrating that occasion. And These few verses that we have read today are the build-up to this climax of Kaṁsa getting killed. And in the last verse, this is what we heard, that Kaṁsa has been killed and delivered by Lord Krishna. So what we will do is, we will discuss each of these verses briefly, from 31 through 37. So in the 31st text, we see that Kaṁsa has seen in front of his own eyes his powerful wrestlers, including Chanur and Mushtik, being killed effortlessly by Krishna and Balaram. Everybody was very happy. Everybody offered blessings and benedictions to Krishna and Balaram, except one person, and that was Kaṁsa. Kaṁsa was not at all happy, and that is an understatement. He was very upset. And because he was upset, he stopped all the musical performance. In the Gopal Champu, Srila Jiva Goswami says, Malla natana krita viśva vimohana. When Krishna was wrestling with the wrestlers, it was not like a common wrestling match. I don't know how many of you have actually seen a wrestling match, but in childhood sometimes you would see these wrestling matches, and I'm sure many of you have also seen them. And the wrestlers, they fight together. It is not something very graceful. It is very, shall we say, not elegant. They sometimes pull the legs, sometimes grapple with the neck, they push, they pull, they do so many things. But for Krishna, Jiva Goswami uses the word Malla Natana. Nat means an actor or a dancer. Nartana also. So when Krishna was wrestling with the wrestlers, the powerful wrestlers whose bodies were like thunderbolt, it was very elegant and graceful on Krishna's part. Just like when Krishna was dancing on the hoods of Kaliya, and the hoods of Kaliya were constantly moving up and down very rapidly. And it was also a life-threatening situation for anybody else who might have been on top of Kaliya's hoods. We know that when we are standing on a platform that is moving like in a ship at sea that is rocking, we are uncomfortable and we are not graceful. But when Krishna was on the hoods of Kaliya, which were moving very rapidly, he was still dancing extremely gracefully. So it's easy to understand that when he was wrestling with Chanur and all the others, he was also extremely grateful. Natana krita. And his elegant and graceful wrestling charmed, enchanted all those who were present. Viśva vimohana. Vimohana means to enchant completely. Of course, Kaṁsa was not enchanted. He was deeply disturbed and fear-stricken. In the 32nd and 33rd verses, Kaṁsa speaks. And he says, Nisarayata durvrittau vasudevatmajau purat. Vasudeva, or Vasudeva rather, Vasudeva atmajau. Atma-ja means the son. So Atma means self, Ja means one who has come from. So Jau refers to the dual case. So there are two sons of Vasudeva, Krishna and Balaram. Nisarayata, expel them, throw them out, Purat, from the city of Mathura. Why? Durvrittau, because the two of them are very wicked in their mind. So throw them out. Dhanam harata gopanam, and confiscate the wealth. Hara means to take away. Like in Hari, one who takes away. Harana. So take away the dhanam, the wealth of gopanam, of the gopas, the cowherd men. And nandam badnita durmatim, and tie up, arrest this Nanda Maharaj, who is a fool, durmatim, whose heart is very crooked. Now, in Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentaries, we often see that when somebody speaks ill about Krishna or about Krishna's devotees, very mercifully, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti gives a different purport to it and says that actually Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, would understand these words differently. Have you heard of a word called wordsmith? You have heard blacksmith. Yeah? Blacksmith means one who's very expert in manipulating metal. He makes all sorts of things out of metals. So similarly, a wordsmith is one who can juggle words in such a nice way that it becomes very pleasing. There are many others in the material world who also juggle words. So Srila Prabhupada uses the phrase word jugglery many times to refer to mundane philosophers. But Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is not that kind of word juggler. He is a wordsmith because he is expertly giving the right purport to the words. That is how the word should be. Kaṁsa intended them in a very negative way. But Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur actually says that actually Vasudeva is the most intelligent, or rather the sons of Vasudeva. Give these two boys of unattainable qualities the best position in the city. And when it comes to dhanam harata gopanam, he says actually Krishna is the dhanam of the gopas. He is the wealth of the cowherd men. He is the treasure of the cowherd men. And that is a fact. Krishna is the priceless treasure of Sri Vrindavan Dham. And everybody in Vrindavan treasures him. They cherish him. So much so that even the animals and birds of Braja, they do not disturb the footprints of Krishna in the dust of Vrindavan. Wherever they see the footprints of Krishna, they are very careful not to walk over it, not to blow sand on it or dust. They are very careful to preserve it. They pass through the other way because they understand Krishna's footprints are also the treasure of Vrindavan. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that all of you should worship Krishna, who is the treasure of the cowherd men. And Nandam Badnita Durmatim. Nanda Maharaj has tied Badnita, Krishna, with the ropes of love. And therefore Nanda Maharaj is extremely intelligent. His intelligence is unfathomable. Durmatim. Dur means very difficult. It can mean bad also. Kaṁsa intended it to mean bad. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says Mother Saraswati interprets that to mean very difficult. So Nanda Maharaj's intelligence is very deep, unfathomable, very difficult to understand. His deep intelligence. The great devotees of the Lord are the most intelligent. So this is how Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Mother Saraswati is saying that effectively Kaṁsa is saying that all of you should develop an affectionate relationship with Krishna. In the next verse, he says, Vasudevastu durmedha hanyatam ashvasattamaha. He says, Kaṁsa is saying here that kill that most evil fool, Vasudeva. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur again He says Mother Saraswati doesn't understand it in this way. She changes the meaning of Kaṁsa's words and she offers it with devotion at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. And she is saying there that everyone should take shelter of Vasudeva. Vishwanath Chakravarti says that the word Han has two meanings. One is to kill and the other is to go to. So Mother Saraswati is taking the second meaning and she's saying all of you should go to Krishna. For what purpose? To take shelter of him. Or rather to Vasudeva. And you should go to Vasudeva and take shelter. And Vasudeva's intelligence is also very unfathomable, durmedha. And he is asattamaha. Now, Kaṁsa means this to mean that he is asat tamah. Sat means truth, or it means a person living by the truth, a saintly person. Asat means a demoniac person, a wicked person. And tama means extreme, the most. There is something called taratamya nyaya, the logic of good, better and best. Positive, comparative, superlative. Good, better, best. For example, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Goswami says, actually Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, the spiritual world is Purna. That means it is complete. But Vaikuntha is Purna, Dwarka is Purnattara, more perfect. But Goloka Vrindavan is most perfect, Purnattama. So the word Tama also indicates something that is the most, the greatest. So Asat Tama means the greatest Asat, the greatest demoniac or the wicked person. That is how Kaṁsa intends it. But Mother Saraswati, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, is saying that Vasudeva is Sat Tamah. He is the greatest of saintly persons. And before that indicates that there is no one who can be as saintly as him. So therefore, take shelter of Vasudeva. And there is no greater saintly person than Vasudeva. Then also Ugrasenaha Pita Chapi Sanugaha Parapakshakaha. So also go and take shelter of Ugrasen, who has taken shelter of Krishna. So Parapakshagaha. Now there are two meanings of para. One is another person, the other person. In this context, Kaṁsa means the enemy. And he's saying because Ugrasen and his followers have taken shelter of my enemy, therefore you should kill them. But the word para, as we know, also means supreme, param. So, Mother Saraswati is saying, Ugrasen and his associates are parapakshagaha. That means they have taken shelter, they have gone to the pakshagaha, they have gone to the shelter or the side of Krishna and taken shelter of him. So you should take shelter of Ugrasen, who has taken shelter of Krishna. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur often gives purports like this. When Jarasandha spoke ill about Krishna, and also when Indradev just before the Govardhan Leela spoke ill about Krishna, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has described in his purports that Mother Saraswati takes the positive meaning of these curses and she offers them as praises at the lotus feet of Krishna. Then in text 34, we see that Kaṁsa has been raving. He has been speaking very, very angrily. Prakupito, as Kaṁsa thus raved so audaciously, the infallible Lord Krishna, intensely angry, quickly and easily jumped up onto the high royal dais. So the important word here that the acharyas have chosen is prakupitaha, that Kaṁsa was very angry, extremely angry. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says he became angry because he heard enmity expressed by Kaṁsa towards Krishna's devotees. And in the Gopal Champu also Srila Jiva Goswami says, Kaṁsaja Guru Nindana Kampakula. He says that upon hearing Guru Nindana, Guru Ninda, the Ninda or the blasphemy of respectable personalities, by whom? Kaṁsaja, that is coming from Kaṁsa. Then what happened to Krishna? Kampakula. Kampa means trembling. So Krishna started trembling with anger. He was shaking with anger. And he says, Drishti vistirna dyuti shampakula, that his glance was glittering like lightning. So simply, Krishna's glance can sometimes be very kind, very loving, very attractive, and sometimes that same glance can also be like fierce lightning, like a bolt of lightning that can come and strike down anybody. And now it's interesting that it was not, so quickly and easily jumped onto the high royal dais. So it was not difficult for Krishna, even though the platform of Kaṁsa was at a much higher level, he very quickly and easily jumped up. So this whole idea of Krishna becoming angry when the devotees are offended is a theme that recurs many times, not only through the Bhagavatam, but also in general through the Vedic scriptures. Now, of course, it is a fact that the association of devotees is a great benediction. And it can give us the perfection of life. It can be very pleasing, it can be very nourishing, and one can develop love of Godhead in the association of devotees. But Srila Prabhupada mentions in one purport that we receive different things from the same object or same person depending on our mentality. It is the strength of the recipient that determines whether we take good from something or somebody or we take bad from it. He gives the example that there are some vegetables and flowers that flourish in scorching sunlight, and there are other vegetables and flowers that completely wither away and they die in the scorching sunlight. So it is not the sunlight that is the cause of birth or death. It is the receiving power of those flowers and vegetables. So similarly, the association of devotees, if we glorify the devotees, if we serve them, if we are in a very positive devotional mood, then we can get tremendous benefit. And we can attain love of Godhead if we follow the instructions of the devotees. But if we are not respectful to the devotees, if we are offensive, if we are blaspheming the devotees, disrespecting them, and so on, that very association of devotees can be destructive for us. And even though the devotees do not take offense, Krishna takes offense. And Srila Prabhupada says in one purport, and I was speaking on this theme in one lecture in Delhi, that just as when we go out into the sun, we can tolerate the heat of the sun on the head, but we cannot tolerate the heat of the sun below our feet. I think many of us who have gone on parikrama, we know that if you're walking bare feet around Govardhan, let's say in the sand, in the afternoon, and the sand is very hot, you can't walk on it. It's very, very hard to walk. You can't tolerate it. You can walk on the street, which is less hot, and you can tolerate the same sun on your head, but you can't tolerate the sun, the heat of the sun below your feet. So in the same way, sometimes Krishna can tolerate offenses to himself. There is a limit to that also, as we see with Shishupal. He tolerated 100 abuses. Then finally he said enough, and he cut off his head very mercifully. So Krishna can tolerate offenses to himself, but he cannot tolerate offenses to his devotees who are always situated at his lotus feet. So the residence of the devotees is Krishna's lotus feet. So if somebody performs an offense there, then he cannot tolerate. So therefore Krishna became very, very angry. In fact, Sati also says the same thing to her father Daksha. This purport is given by Srila Prabhupada in that section of the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, when Daksha insults Lord Shiva. And Sati is his daughter, but she is Lord Shiva's wife. So she becomes very angry that her father has insulted her husband. And then she says that the dust of the lotus feet of a great devotee are the cause of great deliverance and joy, but that very same lotus feet can also, the dust of the lotus feet can also be the cause of great destruction and havoc. So in any case, now that Kaṁsa has been speaking so harshly and badly about the devotees of Krishna like Vasudeva, Ugrasen, Nanda Maharaj and so on, naturally Krishna is very, very angry. So in that anger, he swiftly jumps up. And Jiva Goswami in the Gopal Champu again says that even though he jumped immediately, it was a very playful jump. Now it was much higher than the Olympic high jump, but he very playfully jumped. So he says, Pluti lila krita mancha kshobhaka. Pluti means jump, and lila krita means that very playfully. Just like when children are playing, they playfully jump from here and there. So very playfully Krishna jumped. And he reached the mancha. Mancha means the platform, the dais where Kaṁsa was sitting. And as soon as he landed on that platform, kshobhaka, so the platform shook very vigorously because of Krishna having landed on that. Krishna is lighter than the lightest, but he can also be stronger than the strongest. So even though he was dancing on the tips of his toes on the hoods of Kaliya, but Kaliya felt that with every step it was like a thunderbolt that was striking him. So here Krishna playfully jumped onto the platform on which Kaṁsa was seated, and the platform shook. But the platform was not the only thing that shook. Krida Vikrama Kansa Kshobhaka. And when Krishna playfully displayed his power, Krida Vikrama. Vikrama means the power, the teja. And Krida means play. So very playfully Krishna displayed his power, and Kaṁsa began to shake and tremble. But his shaking and trembling was out of fear. So in this way, Gopal Champu describes Krishna's jumping onto the mancha, or the platform on which Kaṁsa was seated. And then in text 35, the important word here is mrityum, personified. That Krishna approached Kaṁsa like death personified. And this is a very important theme in the Vedic literature. For example, in the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna in the 9th chapter says, Amritam chaiva mrityuscha. I am immortality and I am also death personified. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport to this verse in the Bhagavad-Gita says that the life that sustains us, that life that prolongs the duration of our existence in this body, that is Krishna. And when death comes to us, that is also Krishna. So Krishna is life and Krishna is death, both. And similarly in the 10th chapter of Gita also Krishna says, Mrityu sarva haras chaham. I am personified death who takes away everything. So in the purport Srila Prabhupada says that as soon as a man is born, he is dying at every minute. Death is devouring every entity at every moment. But the last stroke is called death itself. So this concept is very important. The idea that we are dying from the time we are born and death is devouring us like a serpent, that is python, that is swallowing some living entity. And the last stroke is what we are familiar with and which we call death. But actually death is born at the time of birth. And this point is also stated by Vasudeva to Kaṁsa. When Kaṁsa is about to kill Devaki on the chariot, just after they have got married, and the voice from the sky declares that the 8th child of Devaki, O fool Kaṁsa, will kill you. And Vasudeva in some way or the other is yena kena prakarena, somehow or the other is trying to prevent that. And one of the arguments that Vasudeva gives is Mrityur janmavatam vira dehena sahajayate. He says, "Oh hero, oh brave one, please know that death is born along with the body." So in this way, Krishna is life and Krishna is also death. To all the embodied living entities in this material world, Krishna comes, or rather death is something very familiar, especially to those who are demoniac in nature and who do not accept God. Srila Prabhupada says God comes to them as death. So Krishna comes to the demoniac as death. He shows them his face, which is very unpleasant, the face of death. To those who cannot tolerate or do not have faith in the beautiful face of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he does show them his face, but he shows them another face, and that is the face of death. And that face is extremely cruel. But for the devotees, it is the opposite. Death comes as Krishna. So for the demons, Krishna comes as death, and for the devotees, death comes as Krishna. Because for the pure devotees, death is nothing but an invitation, an escort by Krishna to the spiritual world. So when the pure devotee departs from this world, then Krishna and Krishna's agents personally escort that living entity, that soul, back to the spiritual world. Srila Prabhupada has given the example of a cat. When the cat holds the kitten in her jaws, the kitten feels shelter, safety, security, love, comfort. But when the cat holds a rat in the same jaws, the rat feels the exact opposite. The rat feels this is death personified. So similarly, death is very ghastly for the non-devotee. But for a pure devotee of the Lord, death is welcome because death is Krishna. And through death, Krishna is facilitating the release of the devotee from this miserable material existence and is taking that pure devotee back to his eternal association in the spiritual world. And Srila Prabhupada elsewhere also says that for a pure devotee, giving up the material body and accepting a spiritual body happens simultaneously, just like lightning and illumination happen simultaneously. So in this way, Kaṁsa, he is the perfect demon, Asura-tama. So he is the greatest demon, and now he is seeing death personified. Krishna has come as death. And naturally, he is afraid, but at the same time, being a Kshatriya, he is also very alert to defend himself, and he gets up. And in the 36th verse, we see Shukadeva Goswami describing how Kaṁsa is very agile and very alert and very strong and very expert in wielding weapons, and he is trying to fight Krishna. But Krishna very easily, effortlessly and powerfully grabs Kaṁsa, just as Garuda can grab a snake, very playfully. So for the demons who fight with Krishna, it's a matter of life and death, and invariably it ends up in death. But for Krishna, it is just a playful sport. And this whole idea of Krishna playing with the demon before he finally kills him happens many times also. For example, when the Lord appeared as Narasimhadev, he fought with Hiranyakashipu. It was a fierce battle. And sometime later, then Krishna and Narasimhadev was just playing with Hiranyakashipu. And finally he said, it's time, and he killed him. So in this way, for Krishna, killing of demons is just a playful sport. And it's also something that makes him relish the Veera Rasa, the secondary rasa of chivalry. And Krishna's killing of demons has many other purposes as well, which is topic for another session altogether. And finally, in text 37, Shukadeva Goswami describes that Kaṁsa, or Krishna, grabbed Kaṁsa by the hair. He knocked off his crown and threw him off the platform onto the ground where the wrestling mat was. Srila Jiva Goswami says that he did that violently. And Sahasa Mokshada, Jiva Goswami also says that immediately he gave him liberation. He killed him on the spot, and right then and there he liberated him. In the purport, we see Srila Prabhupada writing in Krishna book that Krishna at once straddled Kaṁsa's chest and began to strike him over and over again. Simply from the strokes of his fist, Kaṁsa lost his vital force. So right there and then on the wrestling mat, Krishna killed Kaṁsa and delivered him. And this is that picture that is here in the Bhagavatam. And this particular 37th verse is depicted in this painting. So when all of you go back, you look at this painting. These paintings are miracles. They are excellent means to meditate on Krishna and his pastimes. So we can get a very vivid vision or understanding of what happened at that time. And remember, Krishna was only about a little under 11 years old at that time. So this was something that happened most miraculously. And Kaṁsa is now dead. A very wonderful pastime has taken place. And the Supreme Lord, who is independent, who is the support of the entire universe, threw himself upon the king. Now Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Krishna did that because he wanted to shield his body from injury when he fell off, when he jumped off and came onto the ground. So he used Kaṁsa's body as a cushion. to protect himself so that the impact would be borne by Kaṁsa's body and Krishna would be safe. Of course, Krishna is always safe, but because it's a pastime, he does all these wonderful things. Shri Shri Radha Shyama Sundar, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai, Srila Prabhupada, Grantharaj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Kaṁsa Vadh Leela ki Jai, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol, Hare Krishna. Any questions or comments? May I make a small comment now? I don't feel bad, but it's just also something that I feel that after class, better not to clap, because it increases the ego of the speaker. And it's not a healthy thing to do. We should clap in Sankirtan, then we can clap as much as we like. So when we are hearing the class, then we relish it, and then we have rasa and the questions and the answers and all that. Any questions? Somebody raised a hand somewhere. Yes, Rambhadra. Is there a mic or yeah?
Thank you for the wonderful class. Maharaj, you are describing the description of what Jiva Goswami gave in Gopal-champu. Now, I want to ask regarding that. In Gopal-champu, Madhukanta and Snigdhakanta are narrating these pastimes in Gopal, Golo, to Krishna himself and all the Brahmasis. So how do we see the description of Jiva Goswami explaining to Gopal-champu these pastimes? Because is it that he has created this, or is it actually an event which happened and this is how he's describing the pastimes of Krishna?
See, in Gopal-champu, the pastimes described are from the very beginning of Krishna's birth, right up till the time when he actually returns to Vrindavan after killing Dantavakra. So he has described many of the pastimes in brief and some very elaborately. So this is Jiva Goswami's transcendental meditation. When the acharyas give purports like this, and also like Sanatana Goswami in Brihad Bhagavatamrita and other books, we can understand that they are reality. And for such transcendental phenomena, time and space are not limitations. Whether something is going to happen later in future and so on and so forth, that is not a barrier or a hindrance. Okay, so these descriptions are free-flowing. No botheration of time and space. Okay? Yes. It's 9 o'clock. Prasadam. Those of you who wish to leave are free to leave. You can. Yes.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. My question is, as a struggling sadhaka, and as you say, this main obstacle that Krishna's lotus feet, one of your devotees arrested. So therefore, and there are so many kinds of offenses apart from sinful life. So now, so major is this one. So in essence, what to do so that we get safeguarded as a struggling sadhaka from this offense, so that
So how to safeguard ourselves from Vaishnava aparadh? Is that your question? We don't do Vaishnava aparadh. That's the only way. We have to be cautious. The problem comes when you're doing management. If you're not doing management, it's much easier for you to avoid Vaishnava aparadh. Okay? Those of you who are doing management services, you know it is very difficult to balance. You have to get things done and also you have to avoid Vaishnava aparadh. But still, we have to try to do it without offending devotees. That's very important. We should not let familiarity breed contempt. We will see mistakes in devotees undoubtedly. But our respect for devotees should always remain. And if we consider ourselves always as a servant of devotees, as Mahaprabhu has instructed, then we will be able to at least avoid an offensive mentality. And even for some reason, if we somehow do it, we commit some offenses because that is the nature of our service and that demands it, or because that is our nature and somehow we have said something or done something, we can go and beg forgiveness from that devotee and settle the matter. Okay? Correct. Yes, behind.
Thanks for the class. So Maharaj, the question is, Krishna took 14 years to kill Kaṁsa. So if you see during that period, Devi and Vasudeva, they suffered so much for 14 years. And in this verse you mentioned that Krishna tolerates whatever offenses someone can on him, but when it comes to devotee, he cannot tolerate. So is it like, my question is and I also know in the past some stories there because of which they had to suffer for 14 years. So the question is the karma and action-reaction, it even works for his mother and father, or is it like Krishna Bhagavan easily avoided that? So what is the reason?
The law of karma is only meant for conditioned souls. It is not meant for pure devotees and certainly not for personal associates of Krishna. So they are beyond the law of karma. These events, including the apparent delay in meting out justice, is part of Krishna's pastime. Because when Krishna does something, he accomplishes many objectives at one stroke. So he has multiple things to do when he comes. So when he waited for this amount of period, it was necessary to wait, because he had to do his Vrindavan pastimes. So he could have even prevented the whole thing from happening. But the whole idea was that he should come down, paritranaya sadhunam, vinashaya ca dushkritam. So he had to also wait till Kaṁsa's offenses had built up to a certain degree. Like the capital of offenses had to be built up so that he could then be destroyed. Okay. Yes, one over here. Mic, please.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
You said that Kaṁsa was actually abusing devotees and relatives of Krishna. And Saraswati was translating everything in an opposite way, the positive way. So is that also one of the reasons why Kaṁsa was delivered immediately when he was killed? And how about others who offend directly with Krishna or the devotees? Does Mother Saraswati will help them as well to deliver?
See, Kaṁsa is not an ordinary soul, please remember. He is Krishna's uncle. And he was killed personally by Krishna. The Acharyas have cautioned us that we should not think that because Kaṁsa was a demon and he was killed by Krishna, so we can also be like that. No. Kaṁsa was delivered because he understood who Krishna was, and he was constantly meditating on Krishna from the time of Krishna's appearance. So he was Krishna conscious, though not as a devotee. One doesn't call him a devotee. But because he was all the time meditating on Krishna and he understood who Krishna was, therefore Krishna delivered him. Right? Whereas for demons like Hiranyakashipu, he did not understand Nrsimhadev to be Lord Vishnu, and he did not have that sense of hatred so much. So therefore, he was delivered, but he did not go back to Godhead. He had to take the next birth as Ravana. So he got enormous opulence because he was killed by Nrsimhadev. Ravana had so much opulence. Okay. So, but Kaṁsa, he understood and he was always focused on Krishna. And we will see that in the verses to come also. Okay, all right. Just one last question to the Mataji side, and then we'll stop. Right.
Hare Krishna, my most humble obeisance and devotees. As you mentioned about devotee association, that it could either give us love of Godhead or it could be destructive in case the mentality is not proper. So my question is that in the latter case, then is it because of like past conditionings and negative impressions? So is it advisable to avoid devotee association in that case?
Prabhupada used to say, he used to talk about the laddu of Delhi. One who eats it repents, one who doesn't eat it also repents. In the sense, see, we cannot do without the association of devotees. Without that, we cannot attain success. So all we have to do is to be careful. We have to be very cautious when we are dealing with devotees and remember that we are dealing with devotees. And that is the only way. And as I said earlier, and sometimes when we do offend somebody, then we beg forgiveness and settle the matter. We should not let things linger. And at least in the association of devotees, we should never let ego, false ego, come in the way, because that will be a great hindrance for our spiritual development. Okay, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.